Thank you, Ben Underhill, District 2. Since St. Mary's beat Villanova, I only have a couple of questions here. First, Barb, what you said is that the individual will establish the system and then hand it over to the town. Would there be any money, let's say 1 month's worth, $3,000 or $4,000, to have this individual start June 1? Because if you have the individual start July 1, the system start July 1, I think you might have some issues. If they could start a month or even 2 months early towards education, that would be beneficial. If the ultimate goal is also to hand this over to the town, is there a need to make this a 1 year versus a 6 month, i.e. the $20,000? Thank you.
The actual motion is for a period not to exceed 1 year. Pardon me? Yeah. So we are looking at a period of a year. The actual, when we put the bids out, because of that issue of the fiscal year starting July 1, and because I didn't know if we were going to have funding in this year that we could shift over to this, we're not looking for there to be the bag system to be implemented and to be operational until September 1st.
Question is on the First Amendment as proposed. Mr. Cooper.
So I recognize that this proposal is for 1 year. I would like to remind the assembled body that 17 years ago there was a coordinator that worked for 1 year. I don't know how that was paid for, but I know at the end of the year recycling was far above what it is today. It has never gotten to that point that it was back in 93, I think. I think it was in 2002, there was a summer intern who wrote a nice report with a lot of recommendations that have been repeated here today and at other times, but none of those recommendations were implemented. What I am concerned about is the handoff. And I know the actual motion here is for 1 year, but I hope that the public will be open to the possibility that this person, if we get the right person and it's voted for, will demonstrate his or her value to saving money for the town and the possibility of continuing that. Because I really think that the weakness in the past has been nobody has been in charge. Nobody has been tracking it, and the handoff has already twice not happened. Thank you.
Question is on the recommendation as made by Ms. Edwards. Mr. Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Is it because I'm so short that you don't recognize me? That's probably so. Chuck Cummings, District 1. In all deference to Ms. Ekstrom, I think we have to bear in mind that this is a pilot program that we're entering into, and that the need of a coordinator is essential to lead us through the maze that we have ahead of us. I think it's important that in this period of a year that we have such a person who may well save us lots of dollars and at least direct us, hopefully, in the right direction. And I would hope that we would vote for the $40,000.
Question is on Section 1 of the Edwards Amendment. Mrs. Tunis. Pardon me?
It's not Mrs. It hasn't been for 34 years.
Oh,
Article
I'm
14.
sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Article 14 states in here that the $20,000 was for a part-time temporary trash recycling coordinator. Now, Ms. Edwards said $40,000. I would like a part-time job for $40,000 a year. So, do we specify that it is a full-time position?
Yeah. The amendment says Ms. Tunis, it's going to be $40,000 for the hiring of a contract recycling coordinator for a one-year period. Well, I'm not sure if it's full or part. Full-time. Okay. What, Mr. DeGray, what is your understanding of what we were supposed to be putting into this amendment?
Mr. Moderator, I'm reading the article, and it says nothing about part-time. It says not to exceed 1 year. And so it was the board's thought that this would be a 6-month position. And so with increasing it to $40,000,
It says it under, the actual article doesn't say it, the description on page 11 says that part-time, the actual articles.
there's a description which you now have in your hands, which is in our booklet on page 11, which talks about it, but we go by the actual article. So your point is well taken, but we go by what the articles are, and so therefore the $40,000 would be up to for a position, and that would also include salary plus materials needed for the coordinator's position.
Well, I guess the question is, what is in the book at page 11, which is, I assume, the same that was in the newspaper article that published the warning for this meeting, is not the same as the town offices delivered to me yesterday. The article in my package is different than the article as printed on page 11, and I think that's a reference that Ms. Tunis is making.
Correct.
It does talk about part-time. This doesn't say part-time.
Right. If I may, on page 11, that's a summary of an explanation that says at the beginning, at the top where you talk about the actual article, transfer $20,000 from the general fund balance to the general fund for trash recycling coordinator. Then we go on to explain what that is. Under what was actually published in the warning, it makes no reference of part-time or full-time. It only talks about it only talks about a coordinator. And under the motion, it only talks about a coordinator. If you're asking, is this going to be a part-time or a full-time position, I would probably say it would start out, I would assume, full-time. Would it always be, and what is full-time? Full-time for us is 30 hours. It could be 30 hours, it could be 37 and a half, could be 40 hours. I would ask the body to allow the town to hire a coordinator at the level that is going to get the job done. I would anticipate that getting the job done at the beginning of this process will be full-time. I do not necessarily know if at the end of a year you are still going to be needing a full-time person of 40 hours or 37 and a half hours to implement the program. And I believe that's why when this was originally done, we were looking, and the talk had been about a part-time temporary person. You'll also notice, I think, in the motion, it talked about a contract. This doesn't say contract either, but that's the difference between the motion that was made. So I think if that explains the difference from where we're at, from where we started.
Okay. All right. Now, the question was raised, and I just think for clarification, on page 6 of your orange book, Article 14 does read the same as I initially read when I presented the article. on page 11, which is only for description purposes and is not basically part of the article that was originally warned, has now been amended by the amendment of Ms. Edwards. So I think, Ms. Tunis, in answer to your question, whatever the article says is what's before us now. And I think the town manager has explained the nature of the contract job, and it's for 1 year period. And it's for $40,000, 30 hours a week. Is that the essence?
Well, we don't want to put hours in, there's no hours in the amendment.
Okay.
We read an article question, and as you can see, the article question on page 6 is what was read. Now we have an amendment on the floor from Sarah Edwards to amend that, and in that amendment, it talks about $40,000 for the coordinating position and $150,000 for the purchase of bags. So I believe, my interpretation is that we're right on task here.
All right. Now, do we have the language that it's for a 1 year period?
Not to exceed 1 year.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're back on Article 1 of the Edwards proposal. Mr. Webster.
I think town manager comment clarified their capacity to deal with the amendment as written, not to be micromanaged by 135 people. And to that end, I'd like to call the question.
Okay. Mr. Webster moves that debate cease. All those in favor of ceasing debate, kindly rise and remain standing. All those opposed to ceasing debate, kindly rise or raise your hand and remain standing. The ayes have it, and debate ceases. And the pending question is the $40,000 hiring of a contract recycling coordinator. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor of so amending Article 14 signify by...
Point of order, we're considering only the amendment at this point, is that right?
We're considering the $40,000 amendment. That's all. Those in favor signify by standing and holding your hand up if you have to. You may be seated. Those opposed, kindly rise and remain standing. You may be seated. The ayes have it, and you've adopted the amendment for the $40,000 recycling coordinator. Part 2 is, shall you amend Article 14 as amended by including the purchase of up to $150,000 worth of, I guess, they're trash bags. Are you? Yes, your point of order?
Did we adopt the amendment, or didn't we just agree to amend the article?
No, we adopted to amend it.
Right, but we didn't approve it.
Well, no. We approved the amendment so that it is now amended to include the $40,000 recycling coordinator. We're now going to vote on the $150,000 trash distribution. Are we ready for that question? Mr. Pillsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Okay, I want you to pay attention when you're voting on this one, folks, because I know when we went on lunch, there was probably a few votes that were changed by what happened during that discussion. So make sure that the people that we want to make sure get these free bags, aren't all of a sudden out in the cold. So I would like to see everybody rise on this one, because for me, that was a big key here. There were several others, but I would really hope that you really know that what you're doing right here when you vote for this 175,000 either up or down, or 150,000, sorry.
Question is on Article 2 of the Edwards proposal. Mr. Phillips.
Steve Phillips, District 3. So now's the time for me to ask Sarah to consider amending her motion. I guess my amendment to her amendment would be out of order, but if you would propose to add the words after purchase of up to $150,000 in bags to be distributed without charge to the residents under the pay-as-you-throw program.
Yes, Ms. Edwards.
I think the clarification would be made available without charge.
Okay. Okay, so
Thank you.
So the proposal of amendment, which apparently is agreed to, and will be considered as part of the original amendment, would be, and to spend up to $150,000 to go toward the purchase of bags to be available without charge to Brattleboro residents under the pay-as-you-throw program. Is that, have I finalized that question? Okay. That's the issue. Mr. Beatty.
My concern is that the bags will be made available for a half hour on Sunday, and that people will have to come in every week to get their bags. I want some assurance that there will be an aggressive program to market that these bags will be available, that it won't be, well, we only gave out $20,000 worth of bags, and, you know, we saved $130,000, so isn't that a good thing? I want this to be an honest program, and for the plan to be that we'll use $150,000 worth of town resources to get these bags out.
Mr. DeGray.
Bob, I can assure you, I'm not coming down on Sunday to distribute bags to hopefully keep the number of people who come in and ask for them. I think that some of your comments may be because it's late in the day, but I think that there's a lot of people committed here today. A lot of people have moved a little bit to try to get this done. And I think remarks about we're trying to do something, we want these bags to go to the people they're intended to go to. Regardless of what socioeconomic level you're in. If you feel that you don't want to pay for a bag, you go down and get one. We have to get out of the batter's box. We have worked hard here. We have spent close to 5.5 hours talking about trash today. That's a compliment to you. And we're still sitting next to each other. We haven't had to call rescue. And so at this point in the day, we're leaving home plate, and we're going to do everything that we can. We've just taken the first step with approving the money for the coordinator, and this is, we're going to go and we're going to figure it out. And like I said before, we may trip, but it's not going to be intentionally. We'll fix our mistakes as we go along. It's not perfect, but we've started something here today, and I hope that I believe, not hope, I believe we're committed to it and we want it to succeed. Thank you.
Question is on Article or Amendment 2 as proposed by Ms. Edwards. Mr. Davis.
Okay, here's the last little thing. I'm not going to talk after this. I promise. I promise. No, I promise. We had a vote of confidence in moving forward with pay-as-you-throw as a community. It was a pretty strong vote of confidence, I think. The $40,000 to beef up the coordinator is a strong vote of confidence that we're going to meet the challenges of this program. I think the $150,000 is a vote of undermining the commitment to make this work, because it turns it into a little bit of a, pay if you can as you throw. And it's based on the assumption that $1 or $2 or $3 a week is the difference between survival in the world, and I'm not really convinced of that. So I am against this amendment because I think we've beefed up the coordinator, we're willing to give it a try, there's been a lot of work to improve it over the last year, and I don't want to see it undermined. There's also a lot of administrative issues around it. If two different family members from the same household come in to get free bags, you're going to be taking ID. How are you going to administer the means test? Who's getting the bags? I just feel like, I personally feel fine about dropping some bags off periodically at the drop-in center, having some bags at school. When you hear a story of a family having trouble getting rid of their waste, but I just think to institutionalize it as an option, I'm concerned about it. Thank you. That's it.
Question is on Article 2's amendment. Dr. Tortolani?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob Tortolani. I'm in District 2. I wanted to speak in favor of the amendment, and something that I want to bring up that sort of reflects on Ms. Baboulis's discussion earlier, and Judy Davidson and Chuck Cummings, and has to do with the fact that some of our most vulnerable population, the very old and the poorer people, have a great deal of pride, and they would find it difficult in some instances to pick up their free bag. Okay? My sense is to go toward what Judy Davidson said earlier and make it kind of the fact that every household has the right to have a single bag each week. That way it's not, if you choose, you can opt out and choose not to buy a bag or choose not to take a bag. But I would say it's more like it should be available to everybody each week, every household, and not be considered a free bag. I'd go with the fact that we have a very strong pride among certain aspects of the vulnerable population, and I think we should be thinking about that as we make our decisions. Thank you.
Question is, shall we amend the article as recommended? Mrs. Davidson?
Sorry about that. Judy Davidson, District 3. I would like to support this article because many people here are concerned about the impact this is going to have on a community, and many people have called district reps and said, they don't like the pay as you throw and how it's been imposed on them. I think this is a first step, and I think that the devil will be in how we explain to the public that these bags are available to residents. And I think that is the task of the coordinator, to come up with language that doesn't demean people and that says to people these bags are available. And you can say, we hope that families that can, I don't know, I'm not even going to attempt to give some language, but I think the devil will be in finding language that we can use in publicizing this to the community so it's not demeaning, and it doesn't make it easy for everybody to just get a free bag, which I don't think is going to happen anyway. But how do we make it really available to people so it's not demeaning? And I think that we need a really good recycling coordinator who can articulate that. I imagine most of these bags are going to be available from the recycling coordinator, so he or she will get a sense of who are the people coming in, and that one-on-one contact I think will also prevent there being abuse. So I would vote for this as a start and really hope that we can work out good language in terms of publicizing it for people. Thank you.
Questions on the second amendment as proposed by Ms. Edwards? Mr. Everett?
Mr. Moderator, Dart Everett, District 3. I move the question.
Mr. Everett moves that debate cease. It's a two-thirds vote. All in favor kindly of ceasing debate. All in favor kindly rise or raise your hand. Those opposed to ceasing debate, kindly rise. You may be seated. It appears to the chair that there was more than two-thirds votes, and the motion to cease debate has passed. The recurring question is, shall you adopt the amendment, which is the amendment number 2 on the $150,000 to Article 14? All in favor, kindly rise and remain standing or raise your hand. Those opposed? It's pretty close. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The chair is in doubt, and I'm going to ask the checkers to make a count. All in favor of the proposal of the amendment of $150,000, kindly rise and remain standing or raise your hand until counted. Okay. Those opposed, kindly rise and remain standing until counted. Listen to the result of your vote. Those in favor of the proposal of Amendment 73, those opposed 52, and the amendment carries. Now the recurring question is, shall you adopt Article 14 as amended by the meeting? Mr. Dimes.
Kurt Dimes, District 2. We've heard some sentiments about the appropriateness of the debate here. I'm very glad, I for one am very glad that several ideas have come from the floor today. I have a modest example myself, and it's inspired by the resolution last year that came to plebiscite at town meeting. It was sponsored by the Safe and Green campaign, and following the will of the people, I think we should make some provision to reduce our nuclear waste.
Mr. Dimes, Mr. Dimes.
Yes, sir.
We're voting on a pending question.
Right.
So unfortunately, your remarks are out of order.
Don't I see this as an amendment to the...
It's not germane. Nuclear plant is not germane to pay as you throw.
Well, we're not talking pay as you throw right now. We're talking about
Yes, we are.
We're talking about the
coordinator. We're talking about the amendments that is going to hire a recycling coordinator.
Yes.
And also is going to hire or give away 150,000 bags.
As you rule, sir.
So, I know it's getting late, but I think we've got to have a little better understanding of what is going on and what subject we're on. The question is, shall you adopt Article 14, as you've amended it by the two amendments. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor kindly rise and remain standing. You may be seated. Those opposed, kindly rise and remain standing. Chair declares that you've adopted Article 14 as amended. Article 15, to see if the town will authorize the purchase of 6.7 acres adjacent to the Brattleboro wastewater treatment plant from Boston and Maine Railroad at a cost not to exceed $25,000. Chair recognizes Ms. Baboulas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town authorize the purchase of 6.7 plus or minus acres adjacent to the Brattleboro wastewater treatment plant from Boston and Maine Railroad at a cost not to exceed $25,000.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded that the town authorize the purchase of 6.7 acres more or less adjacent to the Brattleboro wastewater treatment plant from Boston and Maine Railroad at a cost not to exceed $25,000. Ms. Baboulas, do you want to speak to the motion?
I divert it to the town manager.
Thank you.
Ms. Sunday.
You call me whatever you want. This is the, we actually had this on last year. We asked you to vote it down because we didn't have a price for it. We now have a price for this. Sorry. We now have a price of $25,000. We did have the property appraised, and that's where it came in at. We do have an agreement with Boston and Maine Railroad, in which we can purchase. Chris Hart's leaving. Had she not been trying to sneak out. $25,000. We do have an agreement with Boston and Maine for that. If we do not purchase this piece of property, it will greatly increase the cost of actually doing the improvement at the wastewater treatment plant, because we do need, that's a very small piece of property that our wastewater treatment plant is on. We will need access for staging on this property, and as well the secondary clarifiers. We're adding another clarifier, and that part of that would actually be on the property. So it is actually a vital part of the project. And the Solid Waste Oversight Committee reviewed this. They actually met with and had some additional conversations on whether we really needed this property, and they have endorsed the purchase of this property as well.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 15 as recommended by Ms. Baboulas? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those signify. I'm sorry, Mr. Fallon? If you, all those in favor, kindly rise, stand, or use your hand to signify your decision. Thank you. Those opposed, kindly rise. The ayes have it, and you've adopted this resolution. Ms. Cartwright.
For not knowing the procedure, may I request a small break at this time before we launch into the next article?
Reservoirs are rather low. Okay, well, why don't we take a 5-minute break? Good. We're going to take up Article 16. to see if the town will authorize the sale of tax map parcel known as Chestnut Hill Reservoir upon terms and conditions approved by the Select Board. Chair recognizes Mrs. O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town authorize the sale of tax map parcel number 002-65216.000, known as Chestnut Hill Reservoir, upon terms and conditions approved by the Select Board.
Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded that the town authorize the sale of tax parcel known as Chestnut Hill Reservoir upon terms and conditions approved by the Select Board. Mrs. O'Connor, do you wish to make any remarks?
I don't think so, Mr. Moderator. I think we all know this has been widely discussed. This is a piece of property that the Select Board discussed and feel that we should put out to bid. I know there are concerns that perhaps no one will bid on it. If that happens, then the Select Board will take it back up under advisement. So I wouldn't think that that should be of a serious problem here, but I do think we need to have some discussion on it, and the Select Board just felt that this was the proper disposal of the so-called Scotty's Dam.
Question is, shall you sell Chestnut Hill Reservoir? Ms. Gentile.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Chestnut Hill Reservoir is a historic and ecological asset of the town, created in the 1880s and within easy access of the downtown district. It is enjoyed by many members of our community for exercise and recreation, including dog walkers, office workers on break, parents with strollers and toddlers, cyclists, walkers, and joggers. I have a letter signed by 16 teachers at the Green Street School encouraging you to vote no on this issue to save the reservoir. The school utilizes the area around the reservoir and the reservoir as a science laboratory for students, as well as a walking respite during the day. It is also home and stopping point for ducks, cormorants, herons, geese, bullfrogs, kingfishers, hawks, turkey vultures, and a diverse group of birds and other creatures. We as a town need to be very wary of the unintended consequences of the decisions that just look at the bottom line and do not take into account the short and long-term impact on the quality of life we cherish about our town. Keeping such open and tranquil spaces is essential to our future as a livable community. And as Mr. DeGray stated, we all pay for things we don't use. That's community. Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 16? Are you ready for that question, Mr. Harvey?
This is one of the issues that people in District 3 contacted me about. George Harvey, District 3, by the way. And I have to say that one of the things that occurred to me during the course of the conversations that we had was that selling this piece of property, although it conceivably could add to the tax revenues, might also add to the burden on the town for services. I don't see a good reason to sell this piece of property. There were a lot of good reasons, I think, stated in the conversations that we had for keeping it, and I cannot imagine going ahead and selling this. I would like to recommend, however, that a dialogue be begun on the parts of whatever parties are interested to look at the future of this particular property so that the neighbors, for example, and possibly the teachers at the Green Street School or whoever could try to develop a plan on what to do with it. Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 16? Are you ready for that question? Mr. Fennell?
Hi, Tom Fennell, District 3. I guess I've got one question. If they sell it, will anybody bid? And if, from what I understand, anybody that wants to develop this is going to have to spend an awful lot of money above and beyond the cost of acquiring the land just to make it developable. I'm not sure this is even a reasonable thing. If somebody comes up and offers $1 for the land, are they going to accept it just to put it on the tax rolls? I have thought of a possible idea. It doesn't require selling it, that could turn into a long-term benefit for the town. There's a electrical engineering concept called pump storage, where you buy electric power in the wee hours of the morning when it's cheap, use it to pump water uphill, which you could get from the West River, store it there during the day, and in the evening when air conditioning loads are high or whatever, you sell it back to the electrical utility at a much higher price. And electrical utilities like this kind of deal. So I'm just going to propose that as something to think about in the event you don't sell it. Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 16? Are you ready for that question? Mr. Lynn?
Hi. Steve Lynn, District 3. The town has known for years that it needed to do some work on that dam in order to bring it up to state code, and it hasn't gotten done. 2 years ago, they authorized the expenditure of $30,000 of taxpayer money to study the engineering options to bring it up to code. They got that report from the engineers, but in January of this year, they voted to throw that out and propose something that had not been studied at all, which is the sale. In Article 16, sale of the reservoir looks like a relatively simple measure that would take that accumulated responsibility for maintenance and devolve it onto some future owner, providing they might be able to find one. I don't think that's fair. They also say they want to get it onto the tax rolls. Well, that would mean that the surrounding residents couldn't just, get together and buy it and keep it as it is. Something would have to be done, some kind of development in order to generate a profit in order to pay the taxes. And as someone already made reference to, the engineering report said it would cost at least $500,000 just to bring in fill and do the landscaping to make it buildable. That's not counting environmental impact studies that would have to be done because it's such a wet area up there, and taking away the dam would have some kind of hydrological effects on the surrounding properties, which could open the town up to litigation. The town would also be vulnerable to litigation from all the people who are supporters of the reservoir, from the people who come up there and use it for recreational purposes, people who value it as a historical asset, and the surrounding residents who are concerned about, their effects on their property. I know for a fact that there are people already looking into legal challenges. So this delay would not only probably push up the cost of the work that needs to be done, because any delay usually, results in higher costs later on, but the town would open itself up to the expense of defending against litigation. I just don't think that when you need to balance the budget, the thing to do is start selling off town assets. I don't think that's a legitimate way to balance the budget. Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 16? Mrs. Coram.
Lynn Coram, District 3. I walk around there also, and it is a nice loop to walk. You see 8 beautiful big homes that surround the reservoir. And I think to say that it is an asset for Green Street School students to study there is a stretch. The little frog pond beside it, which is not connected, is what they study. They can't even get in the reservoir because there's a fence around it, which you are not supposed to cross. I think it points out to the fact that something needs to be done. The dam is not safe. The state engineers have said it could flood out. I think it makes the houses downstream of it, so to speak, if it were to break, unsellable, which is just as much supposition as what we just heard. And why not see if there is a private enterprise out that would take it over and make it safe, and then if it doesn't work, it falls back on the town. But it doesn't fall back on the town taxpayer owners. It falls on our water sewer bills, which you know we just had a high increase. And is it fair to have all the people who pay water sewer bills pay for the preservation that 8 homes in one of the better sections of town enjoy?
Question is, shall you adopt Article 6? Mr. Sprite. 16, I'm sorry. Mr. Sprite?
Rick Sprite, District 3. I've been in a quandary about this one because I enjoy that area myself, and at the same time I understand the interest in putting it back on the tax rolls if it's not being used. I think someone just came up with a genius idea to solve all of these problems and a few others at the same time. That pump storage idea is brilliant. I think that is terrific. That would actually put it into use. It would keep it as in its current form as an aesthetic asset. It could put it on the tax rolls, and it could deal with the energy issues that are being dealt with in part at great expense with the Southern Loop, and could have rendered that unnecessary, but certainly could help reduce our cost for energy and our need for additional generating capacity, as in what we might need to replace that toxic waste producer down in Vernon. So I would urge those of you who are concerned about the nuclear plant to vote this current proposal down with an eye towards studying this proposal that came from the floor, which I think is very worthy of study. Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 16? Mr. Coram.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a little bit of background, if I might take just 2 minutes. In this matter, the Select Board sits as Water and Sewer Commissioners when it comes to this dam issue. And as such, our duties are to provide potable water and treat that water once it's been used at the wastewater treatment facility. That's what that's what we do when we sit as Water and Sewer Commissioners. Those are our 2 functions: provide potable water to people and then take care of it on the other end. We need to, I think, be mindful of the ratepayers. We've heard a lot about low-income, other people. Those people pay these bills. There's 3,500 accounts now, approximately, that pay for water and sewer. The dam serves neither to provide potable water, nor has it done so for over 35 years. And, of course, it doesn't do anything with respect to the treatment of water. So why should the residents of South Main Street who are on water or sewer, or both, pay for the upgrade to the Chestnut Hill Reservoir? What is the point of residents at Prospect Street to pay for higher water and sewer rates to refurbish the Chestnut Hill Reservoir? And lastly, how can we mandate that residents of any other street in town, Main Street or any other street, including those individuals out at the Mountain Home Trailer Park, now called, I think, Tri-Park, who are on water and sewer now, why should they share in the cost of the persons, that a few people that are going to benefit from any upgrade that is done to the dam? We all pay through higher water rates and sewer rates. That's how if it is not sold, that's how it's going to be funded, ladies and gentlemen. And last May 8th, we approved $32.8 million bond. We've all seen our water bills and sewer bills, those of us sitting here in this room and those listening that have water and sewer. We've seen an increase in that. And I hate to tell you, but it's clear we have a 5-year ordinance. Water rates are going to increase 3% every year, beginning July. This July, there'll be a 3% increase. And we're going to see a 6.1%. That's for the next 5 years. We're going to see a 6.1% increase in our user fees for the sewer. over the next 5 years. So July of this year, July of 2011, it will go up 6.1%. That's already been approved by the Select Board. So I say enough already. It's time to unload the dam. Vote yes to this article. Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 16? Mr. Crisp?
Mr. Moderator, Lauren Crisp, District 1. I've just got some questions with regard to this that perhaps the Select Board or maybe even Mr. Barrett might answer for me. You're proposing to sell the facility. I'm unclear as to whether there has been any state mandate to cure any permit violation or whether there's any mandated improvements that must be made to the dam. Can somebody answer that for me? I've got a couple of questions.
Mr. Coram?
All I can say, and then I'll turn it over to Steve, is that the state has indicated on at least 2 occasions that I'm aware of, and it may be more, that the dam is a high hazard, classified as a high hazard dam. That's what I'm aware of, and that's been that way, Lauren, for I think about the last 8 or 10 years. But I'd defer to Steve Barrett, our Public Works Director, that maybe could answer some of your other questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Coram yields to Mr. Barrett.
Is this on? Hello? Okay. That's too much of a challenge. As far as the dam itself, it is under mandates, as Jesse has indicated, to make repairs, to have a spillway installed. As far as whether that needs to be accomplished before a sale occurs, I do not know. I would refer to council on that.
All right, so Steve, this is subject to a state dam permit of some sort?
There's a state and federal. It's overseen by the feds. The states actually administer a program. They inspect the dam each year because it is a high hazard dam, because if it did break and spill over, there may be danger of losing lives below the dam. So they inspect it each year and they make recommendations. And they have made the recommendation for several years that we make proper repairs and install basically an overflow pipe if there was a peak storm. And other than that, there should be an emergency action plan. Those are the 2 requirements.
And can you tell me how much it would cost to do those repairs that have been mandated by the state and federal government?
The proposal, one of the proposals we had was $219,000. That would be to completely restore the dam itself, put new fencing on to secure the area, and to rebuild and install a spillway. So the $219,000 was one of the alternatives, would bring that dam up to the standards.
Okay. Now, do you intend to do that work before you sell the property, or would you expect a prospective buyer to engage in that work?
When I brought this to the board had recommended that we bring an option to this body to just sell it, and that would be to sell it as is, with no work being done at all.
Well, if you sell it, whoever's buying it is going to be buying it subject to certain mandates by the state and federal government. Is that correct?
That's correct. They would also they would have to take ownership of the dam, and then they would be responsible to get permits to decommission the dam if that was their choice, or if they are going to rebuild the dam, they'd have to get a permit from the state to do that also.
Do you have any idea as to what the approximate cost would be to decommission the dam and to therefore make that acreage into usable, developable land?
Well, I had options. There was actually 8 options, and they range from $135,000 up to $600,000+. The most simple method to take that dam and decommission it is to de-water it and to put a large hole in the face of the dam. And that was one of the basic minimum things that could be done. The estimate was about $135,000, and that leaves a big hole in the ground. For someone to fill it in, there's also options there. If there was a big contract in town, the cost of fill would be less, so there's still options there. The minimum cost would be to actually to get the permits, which I have no idea what the cost is, to go through legally and get the permits and compliance. I don't know what those costs are. Minimum cost is probably $135,000.
Is how much?
$135,000.
And that's just to, when you're done, you have a dam, you don't have a developable piece of property, is that correct?
You have a hole in the ground that was a dam, and that's not filled in.
Okay, how much would it cost to make it into a realistic developable piece of property?
Well, to take the walls and tumble those down and to put fill in, it was estimated about $600,000. And that's a very preliminary estimate. I'm sure, depending on the contractor or where they could get their fill, those numbers could be anywhere between $400,000 and $600,000.
So is it really realistic to expect that we're going to find anyone who's going to want to buy this property for the purpose of putting one or two houses on this land? I mean, when you talk about the cost, the permitting, and all of these conditions, are we really talking about voting about something that's really realistic here?
That'd be a question for the board.
Mr. Barrett yields to a member of the board. Mr. Coram, Mr. Gray.
Well, when this issue came up, this was a 3-2 vote, 3 in favor of putting this article on the ballot and 2 opposed. I was opposed, and I'll only speak for myself.
I was also opposed. To answer your question, I don't think it's realistic, and I also view this as a town asset. I think that we should be holding on to it. I think Tom's idea is great, but we shouldn't. This idea to sell it was made pretty quickly, and we had a process that we went through and general agreement among the neighborhood. And that's really rare when we do stuff. So I don't think we should sell it.
Thank you. I have nothing.
Mr. Phelan. Mr. Phelan.
A couple of points. I, as a parent volunteer a number of years ago, helped Green Street school teachers start the Environmental Learning for the Future program, which continues today. And the reason I'm mentioning is because I would often take groups of school kids up to that area. It is true, not the reservoir itself, because it is true, that has a fence around it, but the neighboring ponds were certainly a valuable asset. And I agree with those who say this is a valuable asset, and we should hang on to it, or at least we should be more considered when we consider the consequences of our actions, and slow this down a little bit. What is of greatest concern is our seemingly inability to address what the state is telling us. They've told us now on, I believe, Jesse, you said on at least 2 occasions, maybe more, that there's some vulnerability here. This is a problem. I believe we should at least bring this reservoir up to a point where the state is satisfied with our actions, so that we're not in this whatever you called category, whatever Steve referred to. I forget what it was, but that's my concern. That we at least bring it to a point where we're not in violation.
Question is, shall you approve Article 16? Mr. Orion Barber.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Orion Barber, District 1. I don't think the town should sell this. It is an asset. Historically, because it was part of the town water supply, it got into the water and sewer district. I think it's an asset for the entire town, and I hope there's some way that we can think it out of the water and sewer district. It's conservation land. It ought to be conserved. I think that the danger of dam collapse and water buildup and so forth should be mitigated in the least expensive and sensible way possible, but that land should be held on to. And it seems to me that the argument that it's unfair that the folks in the water and sewer district have to bear all the cost is a valid one. The cost of this should be borne by the entire town. And so let's get it out of the water and sewer district, because it's not part of the water system anymore, and it's treated as any other valuable wild land, even though it's surrounded by houses. I mean, let's face it, to some degree, it could be thought of, if the water were handled properly, as a fire pond. If you are within X number of yards of a fire pond, your fire insurance rates go down. So let's think it out of the water and sewer district, let's save it, and spend what we have to.
Question is, shall you approve Article 16? Ms. Turnus?
Hi, Catherine Turnus, District 2. What Tom Fennell had put forth, I was wondering if something like that were to happen, we would get it away from your water and sewer, which Jesse seems to really want to do that. Where would it go? Who would manage it? Yeah.
Mr. Fennell's interrogated.
Well, I don't have the answer to that, but there are answers. As we speak now, there are two groups moving to create district power in Brattleboro. It looks like they're going to be getting together, and it looks like district power may very well happen in the near future. That would be one option. They would certainly have to see how it fit into their concept of distributing heat throughout the downtown area and generating electricity to pay for that heat. But it's something within their realm. Central Vermont Public Service might be interested. I know of 3 pump storage operations within the area. There's one down, I think it's Mount Tom, Massachusetts, the ski area down there. Another one is in Rowe, Massachusetts, where they used to have a nuclear station. And a third one is up on Mount Equinox, where it's operated by monks. There's... Say again? That's the one I was referring to when I said Mount Tom. I think it's Northfield, Mass. But there may be 2 of them down there. Mount Equinox is over by Manchester. And there's a bunch of Cistercians up there that maybe they don't talk, but they think. And I can say that the question hasn't been asked. As a matter of fact, the feasibility study hasn't even been done. But it is something that could be looked at and perhaps should be looked at.
Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Sunday.
Just a couple of points of clarification. That dam doesn't have the piping anymore to bring water up to it. We have actually, there has been talk about what you were referring to. The issue is it would be quite expensive. You'd have to get the permission to bring water up from the whetstone back up to the dam. You'd have to do all the piping for that because there isn't the piping anymore. And then so it is something you could look into. It would be quite an expensive undertaking. But that has been briefly looked at before. So we have tried to look at other at options on things like this. The other thing is, as long as it's a dam, as long as there's water and it's classified as a dam by the state, it would be under the purview of the Utilities Department. The Utilities Department does monitor the water levels up there, just as they do any of our other dams or reservoirs. And as long as it's a dam, you would keep it in the utilities, because you would want the folks who work with the Pleasant Valley Reservoir, you would want them to be monitoring it and looking at it and staying within the state permit. So if you were going to conserve it, you would want to completely decommission it as a dam, which means that, and I believe that was one of the options, and it was discounted because the water level that the maximum water level in there, it would be quite low. So that it wouldn't be considered a dam anymore, because part of the idea of where it's a dam is how much water, what your water level is allowed to be in there. And so that would be one of the issues of moving it out of the Utilities Department.
Question is, shall you approve Article 16, Mr. McCarty?
Scott McCarty, District 3. Contrary to public belief, it is not my dam. So I'm a little groggy because the University of Vermont lost their basketball game last night. So yeah. So we have a gentleman here. I'd like to recognize Dr. John Wheeler. He is he was born and raised in Brattleboro. He grew up on Chestnut Hill, and he is I forget what you practice medicine in, but you know. He's a very bright man. He wrote a history of the Chestnut Hill area, and there's a lot of history about this area. And Mr. Moderator, I'd like to yield the floor to him so he could speak.
Mr. McCarty yields to Dr. John Wheeler.
Well, I guess I can start off a little bit emotionally. It was 1957 when I graduated from this very same room, and very proudly have been to Harvard College, and then to University of Penn School of Dental Medicine, and to Albany Medical College, and then completed a program in plastic surgery, and so I understand why my field is confusing. Yes, I do practice that complexity. And I have been on the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital staff ever since that time, which is a total of 33 years. You're right, I don't make a big flag about it, but if they call, I'm certain to respond. I'm based in Rutland at this time, and quite frankly, I'm eager to come back to Brattleboro. So it's a pleasure to be here. And it's exciting to me to see the interest and your attendance and a long day and everything else, and how you really care about Brattleboro in order to be here. Perhaps I can give you just a brief idea. In 1957, as a senior in the English class, we had to write a paper, and I chose to write on Chestnut Hill, the evolution of an island, and how this Chestnut Hill developed, and mentioning of the reservoir and so on. And the construction of the spring-fed Chestnut Hill Reservoir was done by George Crowell in the year 1882. So it's been there a long time, never flooded over, and done well. Chestnut Hill got its name because of many chestnut trees that were on the land. Interestingly, the French word reservoir means to see, to reserve, or to keep in quantity of use. And the wooded and scenic location is developed around that area for recreation. Used to go up there with chariots and so forth, carriages. And just having heard about the use for fire, absolutely. Fortunately, I don't know of any homes up there that have burned. However, sorry, that's my medicine, not the blood supply, the water supply. The water supply perhaps was the blood for the town, because it has converted to be for the lower parts of Main Street, Flat Street and so forth, and for their fire hydrants. And so it has helped others in the community. And it's just so nice to have people come up, all kinds, all places, children, elderly people, and some will bicycle up and go around a number of times and then come back down to get their length of time. Now, earlier today, we heard, understandably, how the Living Memorial Park was a bit too far for people to walk or bike, and so they wanted to have a bigger parking lot. Totally understandable. But fortunately, much closer to the center of Brattleboro is Chestnut Hill. And people in that area can freely walk morning, noon, or night. I don't know of any significant crimes that have occurred up there, knock on wood, of course. But it is a good, sufficiently lit area, and people observant and so forth. So I encourage people to come up and to enjoy the pleasure of it. And whereas my paper topic, of which, if you wish to have a copy of the 20 pages, I will have a list here that you can put your name and address on, and I'll see that you get one. But there are a lot of humorous parts to this paper and what has gone on over the years. The particular thing that I'd like to have you keep in mind is that the groups that come up can use, as was mentioned, samples from the frog pond, and that's right nearby for study and classes, so they can see the large reservoir. And it was from this area that, because my family lived there for the first 25 years, that I was in schooling and so forth here in Brattleboro, that I learned about absorption, evaporation, cloud formation, rain, humidity, and so on. It is certainly a place for all ages to enjoy and to learn. And if you see it from the northern exposure, there's a real gem. Namely, as you come down Route 91 headed south up by exit 3, if you look, you'll see the retreat tower. And that's a marvelous sight from there. And as you get up to the top of the hill, you can look around and so on. Now, there's so many things to tell you that I won't take time to do them all. But I would have you keep in mind that the word reservoir means to have a quantity available in storage. And let's realize that this is unique in its location, but in addition, the arid natures of our population in the U.S. are starting to increase. You've heard about, read about perhaps, areas of Arizona. They're very, very dry. California waits for rain, trying to overcome their troubled fires. And likewise, now we're hearing about arid times in Florida, again, close to humidity and so on, as well as in Alabama. So we're fortunate to have the possibility to have a reserve of water that can be sitting up there to aid people in the town. And there is only one single line that goes up to supply water. So if indeed there were a fire, pumper trucks taking it from there or the hose would have difficulty covering it. But with water in the reservoir, that could be established. So where's the water going to come from? Yes, there's a small amount there now. In the past, there has been the supply coming up from the West River. And we heard that there's some difficulty with the piping, but I would expect that that could be reestablished, or the water that's there could be continued to be monitored. The Other thing which is very exciting to me today, I've learned that 2 letters have been written to the Vermont Historical Society, recognizing that we might, Brattleboro, might be able to get some money from the state to help take care of the reservoir. They consider it a historic site. And the other thing is that people are sending letters in saying, I don't live right there, but I come from different places to come from Putney Road and so forth, is still walking up there and enjoying it. So I would very much encourage that it not be sold, that we look into the Vermont Preservation Society, and I expect we'll do well. Some of the land up there has already been reserved through a Vermont trust, and so there will be other parts that can be saved. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 16? Mr. Borofsky. Mr. Borofsky moves that debate be ceased. I think I'd like to have the count made by the checkers. So all in favor of ceasing debate, which is a 2/3 vote, kindly rise, remain standing, or hold your hand so the checkers can see. Those opposed, kindly rise and remain standing, or hold your hand up. Listen to the result of your vote. Those in favor of ceasing debate, 83. Those opposed, 25. And we needed 71 votes to cease debate, and that's been achieved. So debate is ceased on the pending question. The question being, shall you approve the resolution to sell the Chestnut Hill Reservoir? All those in favor, kindly rise and remain standing until counted. Those opposed, kindly rise. It appears to the chair that the negative noes have prevailed, and the article is defeated. We now go to Article 17, which is the Australian ballot. And if you haven't voted, you can vote up to 30 minutes after we take final recess here. Article 18. To see if the town will provide notice to voters and residents of the town of the availability of the auditor's report at the town offices and/or via email in lieu of mailing said auditor's report. Mr. DeGray.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Darrell Pillsbury had a previous engagement, which is work, which he needed to get some sleep for, so he asked permission to sneak out, and certainly we said, go ahead. I move that the town provide notice to the voters and residents of the town of the availability of the auditor's report at the town offices and/or via email in lieu of mailing said auditor's report. And I would call on Barb Sontag to speak to this article.
Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Sunday.
Thank you. What we're talking about here is, by statute, there is a requirement that the auditor's report for the town be mailed to every resident of the town. There is an option for us to not do that as long as we still continue to make the auditor's report accessible. The way we've been doing the mailing of the audit report has been the insert that goes into the newspaper. This actually costs us over $6,000 to do. What we are asking for with this is for permission to make copies available at town offices, make copies available at maybe other locations, and also available on the web, on our website. And also, if someone requests that we mail them a copy, we could mail them a copy. But we think that there would be the cost of doing this is a little over $6,000. To do all the books, etc., it's about $2,500, and so we could do a lot more copying. I think it would be a little more cost-effective. We do put a lot more we put a lot of information in here that's not required. Actually, the only part that's required is the auditor's report. That is those are the pages you normally don't read. And so what we will continue to make everything available to people, and we want to work to make sure that every citizen has the audit, has the proposed budgets for both the town and the town school, but we'd like to do it in a little more cost-effective manner.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 18? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've adopted Article 18. Article 19, to see what salaries the town school district will pay its school board members. Chair recognizes Mr. Truhan.
Okay. Mark Truhan, Brattleboro Town School Director. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, fellow members, for another fine lesson in small-town democracy. Very appropriate, speaking from the school board. I would like to yield the floor to Margaret Atkinson at this time, please.
Mr. Truhan yields to Mrs. Atkinson.
Just briefly, thanks for hanging in with us. I wanted to take 30 seconds to recognize the service of my friend and colleague Russ Janis as chair of the school board for the past 3 years. It's a tough job, I've just learned, and he served you very well. So I just wanted to thank you. And I yield briefly to Superintendent Ron Staley.
We'd just like to acknowledge Principal Mike Friel, who's retiring this year, and acknowledge his 28 years of service in the district, his dedication to the students in several of the district schools, but his last 8 years as principal of Oak Grove. So we want to acknowledge his great work, and we're going to miss him and wish him well in his new future plans.
Mr. Truhan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 19, I move that the legal voters of the town of Brattleboro School District authorize its Board of School Directors to pay the following amounts into the ensuing fiscal year. to its school directors a sum of $2,000 each, except that the chairman shall be paid the sum of $3,000.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded that the legal voters of the Town of Brattleboro School District authorized its Board of School Directors to pay for the ensuing fiscal year to the school directors the sum of $2,000 each, except that the chair shall be paid the sum of $3,000. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and you've adopted Article 19. Article 20, to see if the town school district will authorize its school directors to borrow money in anticipation of taxes. Chair recognizes Mr. Scholes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the legal voters of the Town of Brattleboro School District authorize its Board of School Directors to borrow money pending the receipt of taxes and not in excess of anticipated revenue for the school year by the issuance of its notes or orders payable not later than 1 year from the date thereof.
Is there a second? Second. Mr. Scholes moves that the legal voters of the Town of Brattleboro School District authorize its Board of School Directors to borrow money pending the receipt of taxes and not in excess of anticipated revenue for the school year by the issuance of its notes or orders payable not later than 1 year from the date hereof. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor of Article 20 signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it, and you've adopted Article 20. Article 21, to see if the town school district will authorize the district to accept and expend categorical grants and aid received from the state of Vermont and the United States government. Chair recognizes Ms. Cartwright.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move the legal voters of the Town of Brattleboro School District authorize its Board of School Directors to accept and expend categorical grants and aid received from the state of Vermont and the United States government.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded that the legal voters of the Town of Brattleboro School District authorize its Board of School Directors to accept and expend categorical grants and aid received from the state of Vermont and the United States government. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and you've adopted Article 21. Article 22, to see how much money the town school district will raise and appropriate to defray its expenses and liabilities. Chair recognizes Mrs. Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the legal voters of the Town of Brattleboro School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $731,402 as its share of salaries and expenses of the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, the sum of $283,961 as its share of bonded indebtedness, and $13,429,651 for current and other expenses for the support of the schools within the district, making all the sum of $14,445,014. If adopted, the portion of this total sum to be raised by taxes to be only that portion not received from revenues from other sources, and that interest at the rate of 1% per month be charged on overdue taxes from the due date of payment of town tax, school tax, installment portion thereof, and the town and town school district taxes assessed on the grand list as of April 1st, 2010 shall be due and payable in 4 equal installments, payable to the town treasurer until overdue, then the collector of taxes, and that such payment of installments shall be made on or before 5 o'clock on the afternoons of August 16th and November 15th, 2010, and February 15th and May 16th, 2011.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded that the legal voters of the town of Brattleboro School District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $731,402 as its share of salaries and expenses of the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, the sum of $283,961 as its share of bonded indebtedness, and $13,429,651 for the current and other expenses for the support of the schools within the district, making in all the sum of $14,445,014, and that if adopted, taxes be raised as the rest of the resolution spells out. Ms. Atkinson, do you wish to say anything?
Does the body wish me to say anything? Yes, I will. First of all, I want to thank those of you who came to our informational meeting the other night. It was really gratifying for us to see the interest, and also we had a wide-ranging and very interesting discussion about the state of the schools, including mentioning, as an aside, that recycling and composting are part of the cultures of all the 3 elementary schools in town, but be that as it may. We have worked very hard to present a responsible budget in a very difficult financial time. The goals of our schools is to assist all students from all backgrounds to learn the basic skills they need to learn to be successful in life: literacy, math, exposure to the arts, learning how to get along with each other. We have a wide-ranging and diverse curriculum that has served our students well. The current budget is not a level service budget. We had to make quite a few cuts in our programs to keep the increase at a reasonable 1.79%. In order to come in with this budget, we made reductions in discretionary expenses, including textbooks, teaching supplies, a replacement of equipment, field trips, special programs, kindergarten orientation, travel, conferences, library books, program improvements, and legal fees. In addition, we reduced our staffing by 3 one-half-time paraprofessionals, 1 full-time paraprofessional, and a 1/3 full-time equivalent for the gifted and talented staff. We share some savings from the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union intensive programs, we share some savings there. I recommend we pass this budget. I think it's good for our students, and if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
The question is, shall you adopt Article 22? Are you ready for that question? Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Emily Thomas, District 3. I address my question, most likely it's going to be to Jim Kane regarding the audit report on page 141 of the town report before you. In there's a statement that said that the district is running as a deficit as of June 30, 2009, $72,222, which is mostly, in fact, due to the nutrition program. It appears that the nutrition program is with a contract with a private vendor, but that the district also retains 1 employee. Is that a new employee with this position? Was this funded new? And why are you waiting 3 years to cover this deficit? When I looked back at the budget, it didn't seem proper.
Mr. Kane is interrogated.
The school board funded the deficit that was accumulated through June of 2008 with a long-term note, and the intent was to repay that note over a 3-year period. In the meantime, we had an additional deficit for the year ending June 30, 2009 9 of $72,000. It should be $722 instead of $222. And the intent is to fund that with an additional note. If you go on page 141 in the town report, you can see the plan to retire the deficit. Under Vermont statute, the school districts can fund a deficit with the school board borrowing money, and that is to be funded or repaid over a not to exceed 3-year period, and that's what the school board's doing. To answer the question about the nutrition program employee, we did have 2 employees until this past year. One retired and the other one is still retained, and that position was grandfathered from when we used to run our own nutrition programs back in the 1990s. So once this last person retires, I'm assuming everything relating to the nutrition programs would be contracted.
So are you saying that the deficit was because one of the employees retired and the nutrition program took on more responsibility?
No.
You said one retired and
No.
you didn't fill the position?
No. No, the nutrition program deficit relates to as everyone here realizes, the district has more than 50% free and reduced students in the schools. It's a balancing act as far as the amount to charge for paid meals. Even the folks that pay for meals, there's a limitation on what they can afford, and we've actually bumped up the charges for the prices per meals over the last few years, but beyond a certain point, there's diminishing returns. Part of the problem is that there's a federal subsidy on the students that do receive free lunch, and there's also a subsidy for the reduced charge students, but it's not a profit-making situation. It's a delicate balance trying to make a go of it with a nutrition program. And I think once the final employee that's grandfathered actually retires, then we'll be able to get the balance more in line. That employee was covered under a union agreement. That's why it was grandfathered, and the same with the prior employees. So the fact of the matter is the cost for those 2 people did contribute indirectly to the deficit because the salaries and benefits under union agreements via school systems are a little different than contractors for nutrition programs.
Okay, and just, I'm only going to bother you with one more question. You had told me that the long-term note was taken out last year to help fund the deficit that I was assuming it was at $178,000 at that point. Now, does the school board need permission from this body to take out a long-term note for debt? I see that you have permission to take out long-term notes in anticipation of taxes, but not necessarily for debt reduction.
No. The tax or the revenue anticipation note or the expenditure anticipation note, those are allowed under statute, and that's for not to exceed 1 year. So they have to be repaid at the end of the fiscal year. And normally what we do is get approval from the school board. There's an opinion from Paul Giuliani, and we get a proposal. And the fact of the matter is the borrowing on the short-term notes over the past few years has been less because the cash flow from the state has been better. Under Act 130, the change with the high school funding, it improved our cash flow at the K-6 level. The note for funding deficits is allowable. The school board does have the authority to borrow up to a 3-year period under statute, and that doesn't, I mean, it doesn't have to come before the body. That's laid out in the audit as far as the plan to retire the deficit, but there's not a requirement for approval from town meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 22, Mr. Phelan?
Peter Fallion, District 3. I first want to just acknowledge all the good work that you all do, and the whole team, including Jim and Ron and everyone. I personally really appreciate all of your dedication, and I think you come up with a very good budget, which I intend to support. I do have a question about special education, and maybe it can go to Jim. In terms of the question of special education is, has the amount of money the federal government providing to states, has that ratio changed at all with the new administration? Or is there plans to change that ratio whereby local districts and the state receives the commitment from the federal government that was made back in the 1970s to fully fund special education? Could you provide some input on that, please?
Mr. Kane is interrogated.
Sure. The IDEA special ed federal funds that come in via the supervisory union and then go to the districts had increased prior to the new administration. We, in the supervisory union, up until 3 years ago, received probably $500,000 in total per year. If you look at that compared to total special ed expenses in the supervisory union, it was in the range of 6 to 7%. It's pretty low. But it did increase in the past few years. The base level is in excess of $700,000 per year. And under the economic recovery funding, under President Obama, we've got this year and next year $1 million additional for special ed, professional development and support, training, staffing, et cetera. And we did receive at the SU level $1 million additional for Title I support. So it has increased.
Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 22? Are you ready for that question? Mr. DeGray.
Thank you. I want to apologize. I would have asked you this question Thursday night had I been there. I had a previous engagement. One of the things that concerns me, everybody has worked hard, BUHS District 6, the town, and communities throughout the state on level funding their budget. One of the things that we did in our budget was not give raises to non-union personnel, department heads, and our town manager. And on page 122, I see that you have given raises at least to your administrators in the schools. Can you talk about why you felt compelled to do that, knowing that budgets are extremely tight and that there were places where you could hold the line, but obviously here you chose not to?
A member of the board's interrogated.
I can answer.
Mr. Staley.
Yeah, that's actually just an allowance. That isn't a certainty. The union contract negotiations are currently underway, and we expect that they'll be completed probably by the end of this school year. So the figure that's in there is an allowance, but not necessarily something that would be awarded.
So am I to understand that your principals are union employees?
No, but we mirror our administrative salaries to the negotiated contract, and we don't necessarily tie it to it. Jim and I didn't have a raise last year. We probably won't have one this year. It probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk more about what's likely to happen, but just want to let you know that's not a given that's loaded in the contract, loaded in the budget.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 22? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and you've adopted Article 22. Article 23, to see if the town school district will authorize the lease of the Kroll lot to the town of Brattleboro for the purpose of a skateboard plaza. Chair recognizes Mr. Janus.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town of Brattleboro School District authorize the lease of a portion of the Kroll lot to the town of Brattleboro for the purpose of a skateboard plaza.
Mr. Janus, is there a second? Second. Mr. Janus moves that the legal voters of the town of Brattleboro School District authorize the lease of a portion of the Kroll lot to the town of Brattleboro for the purpose of a skateboard plaza. Mr. Janus.
Yes, thank you. The one thing I want to sort of reassure you at this point, with the hopes of not extending the discussion too far, though we're open to any questions that you have, is that this is a vote not to say there shall be a skate park there. And the skate park or the skate plaza we're talking about is at the west end by Union Hill of the Kroll lot, which is just west of Green Street and the Powers House. It's land that was given to the town school district years ago and has been used as a park since. We were approached, and Ron went through this in some amount of detail on Thursday night, in terms of the history of it. But we were approached to see if we would entertain a lease with the town to get the process going. What we found, and we tried to limit the discussions to the impact on the schools, and the board felt that the impact on the school was any negative impact was very minimal. There were a lot of really good discussions about what the impact would be, positive and negative in terms of the town, if there are other locations, the impact, positive and negative on the neighborhood and on the whole town in terms of getting a skate park there. This is not a vote to say that this is the spot where it should be. This is a vote. We have a draft lease agreement for 20 years that could be renewed. There would be no financial responsibility to the town or the school in terms of fundraising to establish this park or move swing sets, those sorts of things. But an approval at this point, which we recommend, would then move it to the Development Review Board, the Select Board, the Parks Department, those sorts of things, to determine if this is an appropriate spot, the best place for it. We retain, the school board under the lease would retain a right to approve the final design location of it, just to make sure that nothing happens in a change that would impact the schools. So a positive vote here would be to authorize us to sign a lease, which would then move forward, allow the process to move forward. And one of the provisions of the lease is that there would be a 5-year period under which the fundraising to establish the park would take place. And after that 5 years, if it didn't, successful fundraising didn't take place, then either party may terminate the lease under certain notice. So, Margaret's right. That's it. So we're certainly willing to entertain any questions that you have, but urge you to approve our moving forward with the lease.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 23? Mr. Agavi.
If the skateboard park should come to pass in this location, do I assume then that the school assumes responsibilities for the park, for the safety, for the lighting? Will the skaters be allowed to skate after dark? If there are noise issues, will the school address that, et cetera, et cetera?
Mr. Janus, or a member of the board is interrogated.
This would be, the lease turns over the responsibility, those sorts of issues, to the town and to the Parks Department. And the question of hours and those sorts of things would be turned over there, and determinations would be made at that side. So the school would not be involved in maintaining, administering the park.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 23? Are you ready for that question? Ms. Bamboulas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have lots of different names today. You know, I just want to say that this came up among some of the select board members, the idea of putting the skateboard park there. And I personally am not particularly keen on that site. I think it has serious issues with access and parking and traffic. We've already identified the intersection of Green and High as unsafe for pedestrians, and I don't think it's a good idea. The concern I have beyond that is I don't think it's been fully vetted because it hasn't really been discussed publicly, and the school board is sort of deferring having that public discussion and being a part of it and saying it's up to the town and to go beyond that. And they're the property owners, so they're responsible for it. If they want it, then yeah, great. If not, then you know it shouldn't happen. The other issue is the Parks and Recs board is kind of divided on this, and I don't know if. I just think it's premature to decide to agree to a lease when people, I mean, even just hearing Mr. Janis talking about it, that, you know, we're not that excited about it, so.
Mr. Staley?
Yeah, I just want to point out that the school board, after the initial discussion with members of the select board, scheduled 3 hearings, one for the board itself to consider the location, walked the lot of land, looked at the implications for Green Street School, and then scheduled 2 public hearings that happened at the school board level. We had a great turnout, we had some good discussion, and it was after that second hearing that the board decided to go forward and enter into a lease. We've been working on the details of the lease with Bob Fisher and Ted Kramer. I think we're very close to having an agreement on the lease. And quite frankly, I think the key will be the Developmental Review Board. That's the entity that will really discuss, you know, the appropriateness of the site location and any of the issues around that area. As Russ said, the board felt very strongly to have final approval of the site plan because it does have an impact on the school property. But I really think it's the DRB process that will confirm the viability of that site.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 23? Mr. Coram.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. With all due respect to my fellow board member Dora, I happen to be very excited about this, and I hope that you will vote yes. I personally have been working on this for several months, since basically last summer, trying to find a spot. What I heard from people in the community, adults, those people that skateboard and others, that we needed to have a place. And one of the things that the boarders like is to be visible. And we, as you know, we were going to have that. We talked about having that out at the Route 30 park 2 years ago now, I think, in March of '08 we talked about that. That did not happen because of impervious surfaces issues. Once we knew that that wasn't happening, I went to work because I sensed that there was a need and for a place for people to skateboard. And talked with Russ Janis, who was the chair at the time, and a number of meetings obviously happened. There were public meetings, despite what Dora indicated. There have been public meetings on this. And I want to make sure that it's clear on the record that I support this 100%. It is going to be visible, which is one of the things that they want, which is understandable. It's central to town. Young kids, 6, 7, 8, above, can probably go there, maybe with some supervision, but at some point along that line, they may not have to have a direct parental supervision. They can walk, a lot of them can walk there. It's central to downtown. We don't allow skateboarding on bicycles on sidewalks in town. Can't really skateboard in on the street, etc. So I'm very supportive of this, and I hope that you will vote for it. Keep in mind that the money that is going to have to be raised to do this is not going to be from our pockets in terms of taxes or water and sewer, my favorite, or any, it's going to be donations. And if they can get the money, and I bet you they can, then that money will be raised locally, put towards that. Now, there will be some expense at some point down the road for maintenance purposes, but we think that that's going to be hopefully minimal, and we have some outlet for a lot of people that skateboard. And then not just young kids, there's adults, and they really don't have any place. And I think having it central to town is really key. I know there's one, I think, in Montpelier that's kind of 4 or 5 miles out, and my understanding from Carol a lot, I don't know whether she's still here, is it doesn't get a lot of use. So yes, there's some issues about parking and things like that, but I think it's going to work, and I'm very pleased to say that the two boards have been able to work this through, subject to your approval today. Thank you.
Question is, shall you approve Article 23? Mr. DeGray?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I, like Jesse, strongly agree that this is a place where the skateboard park can go. Again, like another issue earlier on today, we need to be able to have a first step, and if we can't get this portion of the process decided, then the skateboard park up at that site becomes moot. And so I'm going to strongly urge you to support this, and whether the skateboard park comes to fruition is another issue. But we can't have a skateboard park there until we do this lease agreement. So I ask you and urge you to support this so at least the process can move forward. Thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 23? Mr. Sprite?
Frick Sprite, District 3. I guess we can tell who the members of the select board are who are the skateboarders. It's typically the guys, I guess. You're one too? Okay, I'm sorry, I spoke too soon. As a regular user of that park, I did have some concerns about how this was going to affect it, and I'm actually feeling pretty good about it. And perhaps if we vote for this today, there might be a chance that the skateboard park would be ready by the time my son is ready to start using it, and he won't have to cross the street that way. I'm very excited about that also. My understanding is, from everything that's said, that this allows the process to move forward, but does not guarantee it by any stretch. So I would urge voters here to allow that process to go through, especially since we have a group of people who are ready to try and fundraise for it, that it's not going to cost the town anything. I think that's very exciting. I think initiatives like that should be supported as much as we possibly can. So, thank you.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 23? Ms. Valerio?
Francine Valerio, District 2. I'm a member of the Skateboard Park Coalition, and I just want to say, well, first of all, I'm for anything that gives children and young adults physical activity, As you know, this is a real issue and a problem nowadays. And the second part is this is just a very beginning of vetting this whole thing. Going through the Development Review Board is a big process, and there'll be lots of steps along the way. So this is just a really, although it's wonderful and we're very excited, it's just the very beginning. And what I want to say is that I am just very impressed with the people on the committee, many of the people involved, and what surprised me are there are a lot of older dudes, so to speak, in their 40s and 30s, who skateboard with their kids. And so I thought that maybe there'd be a lot of just very young people, but that's not true. So there's a lot of intergenerational involvement as well as role modeling. So anyway, I'm just very excited about this, and people keep asking me, are you going to skateboard? And I don't think so, but I am excited.
Question is, shall you adopt Article 23? Mr. Webster.
I'm an old guy too, older than 40. I need my nap. I'd like to call the question.
Mr. Webster moves that debate cease. All in favor of ceasing debate, kindly say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and we'll cease debate. Question is, shall you adopt Article 23? All in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it, and you've adopted Article 23. Article 24, to transact any business that may lawfully come before the meeting. I have a resolution offered by Mrs. Edwards and Mrs. Burke, whereas Edwin W. Milkey served his native town for many years in several responsible positions, including that as a selectman from 1966 to 1972, and as a town meeting member from its first meeting 50 years ago until his death in December 2009. And whereas he worked for the Vermont Department of Employment Security as a regional manager for 40 years of faithful and dedicated service on behalf of this state, and whereas he was known for his common sense approach and frugality in dealing with town matters, and where he was also known as the brother-in-law of Ernie Johnson, Brattleboro's only major league player for the old Boston Braves. Now, therefore, by the body in regular session assembled, be it resolved that the representative town meeting thank the Milkey family for Mr. Milkey's many years of distinguished service to this town and express deep regret of his death. And be it further resolved that the clerk be requested to transmit a copy of this resolution to his widow, Dorothy Milkey, and the Milkey family. Are you in favor of the resolution? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Dimes offers the following resolution: that the representatives of the town of Brattleboro recommend that all electric power purchased by the town shall be generated from renewable sources. Mr. Dimes, do you care to address the... You may proceed.
Last year, the people voted against nuclear power, and we should honor their resolution by making it meaningful. They certainly did not intend that we vote against nuclear power and then continue to pay for nuclear power. The town of Jericho has adopted such a plan. I talked to the town manager yesterday, the town administrator yesterday. they find that the predictions of their usage and cost by the CVPS were quite in line with the costs that CVPS predicted for them. Then that's really it. I think we were talking about waste a little while ago. We ought to recognize that waste is waste, and we owe it to our children and our grandchildren to ensure that there is not so much more of that deadly nuclear waste. And we should honor the resolution that the people passed last year by voting for this resolution.
Question is, shall you adopt the resolution as offered by Mr. Dimes? Are you ready for the question? If so, yes. The representatives of the town of Brattleboro recommend that all electric power purchased by the town shall be generated from renewable sources. Mr. Underhill, what is your point of order? Well, good question. You want to make a check? Let's do determine if there is a quorum by counting. So what do we need 73 for the quorum, right? Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. We have 76 present. We needed 73, so we do have a quorum. I'm sorry, Mrs. Coram.
I would query Mr. Dimes as to how we would separate this out on the grid. And additionally, how much more money will this cost us and how high will our electric rates go?
Mr. Dimes is interrogated.
CVPS has what's called a provision rider, which is an arrangement for special conditions to be applied to our electrical power accounts. They would give us that would amount to at maximum of 4 cents per kilowatt hour additional, and that would amount to roughly $12 per person per year of all the Brattleboro residents.
Question is, shall you adopt the resolution? Mr. Sprite.
While we still have a quorum, I'd like to call the question.
Mr. Sprite moves that debate cease. All in favor of ceasing debate signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. Debate ceases. All those in favor of the resolution presented by Mr. Dimes signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Well, chair's in doubt. I'm going to make sure we take checkers. Would you count the votes? All in favor, kindly rise and remain standing until counted, or raise your hand. Those opposed, kindly rise and remain standing until counted. Listen to the result of your vote. Those in favor of the resolution, 25. Those opposed, 42, and the resolution is defeated. Now, Ms. Buboulis, do you have a resolution or?
Do. This.
We have 67, so we're under a quorum.
Okay.
Do you have something that needs action, or are you going to make an announcement?
Well, no, I was just going to ask for the whole body to support the rubbish resolution, which the Select Board already passed last summer, because I think that this pay-as-you-throw thing is not going to go away, and I want it something positive and not punitive for the body to support in case it does come back. Whereas the costs of rubbish collection and disposal for the citizens of the town of Brattleboro have been increasing greatly each year, and whereas the harmful effects on the environment resulting from the collection, disposal, and storage of waste have been documented, and whereas there are many inexpensive and creative avenues available to the community to reduce the amount of waste that enters the waste stream, and whereas the town of Brattleboro wants to encourage its citizens to move toward a future of more sustainable use of the world's resources while lowering the cost to taxpayers. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the town meeting members of the town of Brattleboro do hereby call on its citizens to take the rubbish challenge and reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost in order to reduce the amount of waste that enters the waste stream. And furthermore, the town meeting members of the town of Brattleboro call on businesses and community organizations to join in these efforts and support the rubbish challenge by reducing packaging, using recyclable or compostable packaging, composting food waste, providing recycling containers, and providing information to the public. And furthermore, the town meeting members of the town of Brattleboro call on businesses and service organizations to create projects that encourage and better enable the citizens of Brattleboro to reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost. Furthermore, the town meeting members of the town of Brattleboro call on the citizens, business organizations, community organizations, and economic development agencies to invest in building an infrastructure that can allow us to reuse, recycle, and compost locally while creating jobs and products that Windham Regional community needs. And be it resolved that the town meeting members of the town of Brattleboro do hereby call on its citizens to take the rubbish challenge in an effort to reach the goal of reducing the tonnage of rubbish collection in the town by 25% and increasing the town's recycling of recyclable materials to 36%.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. You've adopted the resolution. Is there any further business? Okay. A motion's been made. A motion's been made that we recess until 1/2 hour, which would be 20 minutes of 7. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, no. That's it. Thank you.